Today's video is brought to you by Skillshare. So developing your own film at home is something that can be quite intimidating if you've never done it before, but it's also something that you quickly realize is incredibly simple and straightforward to do. And for me, a few years back when I first tried it, I was hooked instantly to the point where nowadays I've upgraded my setup to a rotary processor and I'm doing all of my black and white here, including large format, and also developing color periodically. So wanted to make this video today just to show you like a very simple step-by-step approach on how to develop black and white film at home. And we're actually gonna develop a roll of Ilford FP4 with this. And this is actually the exact method and the exact tools that I first started out with. Okay, so diving into it, we're gonna start by looking at the necessary items that you'll need to develop your film. Okay, so first up, you're gonna need a tank and a reel for your film to go in. There's a lot of different options out there, but one of the most common is this one. This is a Paterson Super System 4, and this can take 2 rolls of 35mm or 1 roll of 120. So next up, you'll of course need developing chemicals, and then you're gonna need a set of graduates to mix and hold your chemicals. You'll need a stir stick for mixing, a thermometer for checking the temperature of the chemicals, some clips to hang your film from to dry, and then some scissors and a 35mm cassette opener if you're doing 35. You're also gonna need a change bag or just a dark room, somewhere to go to load your film onto the reels. I started out with this change bag from Amazon. It works fine, but it did start to get a little cramped, especially with large format. So I've now moved on to a changing tent. And I'll put links to all this stuff below as well. And then you're also gonna need just some protection, whatever you choose you want to wear. I'm not going to be the one to tell you that. Personally, I just wear a pair of gloves when I'm developing. You might want to wear an apron, a pair of goggles. It's totally up to you. And then the last thing, this isn't a necessity, but it is something I use all the time. It's just some distilled or deionized water. So the development process is very straightforward. You'll get the hang of it in no time, but there's basically 3 different steps you go through and then a final washing of the film at the end. So first up, the development phase. This is obviously what develops the image. And then from that goes in the stop bath. That's what stops development. And then from there, the film goes into the fixer. And this basically just helps with the longevity of the image. This is gonna clear any unexposed emulsion and also just fix the silver in the film. So after that, you wash the film and you're done. It doesn't take much time at all to get the hang of this. And like I said, just feel really confident with it. When it comes to chemicals, there really are kind of endless options out there. With the developers specifically, you're gonna get different looks from different developers with things like contrast and how the grain looks and how sharp the negative is. And then also they're gonna differ in terms of how long it takes to develop your film. So DDX, which we're gonna use today with FP4, I think is 10 minutes. If we are using Ilford 3 by Ilford as an example, I think it only takes 5 minutes. Dilution's gonna differ as well. This is 1:4, 1 parts developer to 4 parts water. I think Ilford 3 is 1:9. Some developers come in powder form, some come in liquid. So again, it is endless. You can get really creative with this. As an example, I was on Skillshare's website. It's the sponsor of this today. I'm gonna talk about them in a minute, but I actually found a course on there which I took and I'm gonna try out, which is developing your black and white film using beer, which is actually a thing as well. So again, endless options for this. So when it comes to choosing a developer, my recommendation would be to go for Ilford 3. And like I said, that's what I started out with. I was always really happy with the look it gave me. But the reason is that it's pretty accessible, it's fairly affordable, and it's efficient as well. And it comes as part of a kit that I'm gonna talk about and recommend in the next section. I moved on to DDX just because I prefer the look of this a little bit more with the films I use, but it is much more expensive and you basically have to use twice as much. This is 1:4 and Ilford 3 is 1:9. But I think what's important, whichever one you decide on, is to just get your first couple rolls of film developed and then you can go from there. And like I said, you can get as creative as possible afterwards once you have more confidence. Maybe you even want to try developing with beer. And as I mentioned earlier, Skillshare is a sponsor of this video today. This feels like a pretty fitting place to talk about them. So I've been involved with Skillshare actually for a number of years now. I have 2 of my own classes on there for both 35mm and medium format film. But if you're not familiar, Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by experts across a number of different industries, including things like photography, filmmaking, design, and more. And for me, it's always been a great resource when I want to learn like a new skill or a new piece of software, just in a really efficient and straightforward way. And recently with my Fuji GFX files, I started experimenting with Capture One, found that I really like the way it handles color compared to Adobe Lightroom. So went on to Skillshare, found a class all about Capture One, and I've been taking lessons since then. And it's been a great way to just really understand the software without having to go and search for a bunch of information in a number of different places. So yeah, really great resource, especially for creatives. And if you want to, say, learn how to develop your black and white film using beer after you watch this video, I'll leave a link below in the description, and the first 500 people to use it will get their first month of Skillshare for free. So when it comes to buying all of these tools that you'll need, the reason that I didn't get into like specifics about brands and models earlier is just because what I would recommend is buying this film processing starter kit put together by Paterson and Ilford. And this is basically going to come with everything we talked about and everything you'll need, including chemicals. So it's going to come with 3 600 milliliter graduates, a stir stick, a thermometer, a Super System 4 tank with 2 reels, cassette opener, film clips, and then it comes with Ilford's Simplicity Kit of chemicals. And what this is a pack of 3 pre-measured pouches, 1 for developer, 1 for stop bath, and 1 for fix. That is enough to make 500 milliliters of working solution, which will do 1 roll of 120 or 2 rolls of 35 millimeters. Okay, so time to jump into the process. And what we're gonna start with is getting our film onto the actual reel. I'm going to show you the process for both 120 and 35. We're developing 120 today, but I have a couple sacrificial dummy rolls here that I'm going to use. This was some gold 120 that went through a baggage scanner, and this is some Ilford HP5 that my daughter grabbed the leader and pulled the whole thing out. So these are good candidates to show you this today. We'll start with the 120. I'll jump overhead and show you how that goes. But first, I just want to quickly show you kind of the tank layout and the reel. So Paterson tank, if this is the route you go, basically you have this funnel here on the inside, which clicks into place. So I've unclicked it. And when this is clicked into place, this is going to be light tight. So you don't have to worry about getting the lid on right away. It's good to go. Obviously that allows you to pour the chemicals in and out during the process, but we'll unscrew it, take the funnel out, and then we have our spindle here with our reel. And these Paterson reels, and there's a few other models like this, but right now you can see this is for 35. But if you back wind it and then you pull it out and then you turn it again, now it takes 120. So these are multi-purpose, really nice, and they just ratchet back and forth, and that allows you to feed the film on, like you'll see in a second. So super straightforward, but we'll jump overhead with the camera now. I'll show you 120, then I'll show you 35. All right, so jumping into 120, we have our film here. This is obviously unexposed film. I've already gone and just pulled this off of the backing paper. It's really straightforward when you take it into the bag, but you can see with the reel here, so with these Paterson reels, you can see, make sure I'm getting this, there's these ball bearings right here, and there's this lip, and this is where you go and you feed the film underneath. And the nice thing with these ones is as soon as you get the film past those ball bearings, that's going to hold it in place, and then it's going to allow you to ratchet it. So there's some other types of film reels that don't have that, and you have to kind of walk it with your hands. But what I like to do is, obviously I put this in a dark bag, so I make sure that this is ratcheted back, so these 2 lips where the film enters are going to be kind of parallel with one another, and then I usually set this just like that in the dark bag. And that way when I go in there, first thing I do is I grab it, I flip it up, I have these 2 areas here, and you can kind of feel them with your fingers like that. So I'll leave that there. It's probably gonna roll away on me. I'll grab my film, and what I do is I'll just grab the film here right near the end, hold it like that. I'll have my reel here, kind of with my fingers right by those, so I can kind of feel for it. Slide that in, and then I simply just pull this a little bit so it goes past those ball bearings. And after that, with these Paterson reels, just so simple. You're basically just walking this. And since those ball bearings are there, it's allowing it to only move forward. Just pulling the film on, and it's as simple as that. And usually the last thing I do is I'll just maybe run my fingers a little bit along here. You don't want to touch the film too much, but just so I can kind of get a feel that it's on there nice and smooth. But typically, if you ever had an issue, you're gonna feel it while you're ratcheting that. It's gonna jam up and you'll know something went wrong. But it's really straightforward. Just a matter of having those lined up, feeling with your fingers, feeding the film underneath, pulling it past the ball bearings, and then walking it forward. So when it comes to loading 35mm, it's going to be a little bit more involved just because we obviously have our film here and it's inside this canister. It's going to depend on how your camera winds it back. Sometimes you will be left with a little bit of the tail sticking out still. And if that's the case, you can actually, cut the bit of the tail off that you'll see in a second and load, start it here out of a dark bag, which makes it a lot easier. I've never done it that way. I've seen some people do it and it makes sense, but I do it this way instead. And it's one of those things you do a couple times, you'll get a feel for it. So if you buy that kit, it's going to come with this cassette opener. You simply just pop it on top here and it removes this top metal ring. And once you do that, it's going to allow you to pull this spindle out. And you have your film here now. So what you have to do though is you have the tail here and there's this curved section. You kind of feel for that when you're in the bag. And what you want to do is you want to just cut that tail section off. So you just have a nice, well, sort of flat edge in this case, but it's just easier than if you're kind of missing part of your film when you go to load it. And I find 120 easier just because depending where you cut this, sometimes with 35mm, you can cut through the sprocket holes and that'll leave kind of like a little bit here that can get caught on the reel when you're loading it on. So you can also, you'll have to feel for this in the dark, but you can kind of cut a little bit of like an angle on each side and that'll help you feed it in and get started. But what I do here is I just leave it on that kind of spindle. Again, I'll take my reel here, which is now collapsed. I would put it in the bag the same way, do everything else here the same, feed it in under those lips, pull it past those ball bearings, and then again, you can just start winding this Paterson reel. And I'll just leave it on the spindle, feed it all in, and you'll kind of feel right when it gets to the end. And what you can do is you can just take this, cut it off like that, and then just keep going. And obviously we're just about past these ball bearings. And again, you can just give it a little bit of a feel to make sure. Again, if there is an issue when you're doing this, you're gonna feel it when you're winding. It'll jam up, it'll get really hard and you'll know something's not right. But typically it goes pretty smooth. And obviously I'm doing this in the light, I'm able to watch what I'm doing, so it probably seems a bit easier and you think that it's going to be more difficult. But again, you do this like a couple times and it becomes so simple to do in the dark bag. So yeah, these Paterson reels I find really easy to load, but that is how I would approach 35. Okay, so we got our film on the reel. We're just about ready to get into developing. What we got to do now is mix up our working solutions to use for the development process. So today we're going to use DDX for our developer, Ilford Stop for our stop bath, and Ilford's a rapid fixer. And with developers, a lot of the times for black and white, they're what's called one shot. And what that means is that you would mix up, say like 500 milliliters of working solution. You would pour that in your tank to develop your film. And after the development process, you would pour it away. It's one use only. Stop bath and fixer can be used, quite a few times. What I would say is just look at the manufacturer's instructions. They'll have like a recommended usage with this. It's going to depend on the exact type that you use. But let's jump into the next steps. We'll mix this up. So the first thing that we have to do when we're making our working solution is we just need to figure out how much of this do I even need to make up. And the cool thing with the Super System 4 is this is really easy to do. If you flip the tank over, on the bottom here it says 35 millimeter, we would need 290 milliliters of working solution. And for a roll of 120, we're gonna need 500 milliliters. So really, really simple to figure this out if this is the tank that you're using. Then what you need to figure out is how much of that is water and how much of that is our chemicals. So each one of these is going to have a dilution ratio listed. So if we look on the front, DDX is 1+4, Ilford Stop is 1 plus 19, and Rapid Fixer is 1 plus 4. So this is pretty simple math most often, but there is a great website, also an app that I use. It's by Digital Truth, and they have a volume mixer. So you can see, we just go here, put our final volume as 500 milliliters, go 1 plus 4, and it tells us we need 100 milliliters of developer and 400 milliliters of water. And this would be the same for the Rapid Fixer, obviously. And then with our Ilford Stop, we go 1 plus 19, and it tells us we need 25 milliliters of Ilford Stop and 475 milliliters of water. Okay, and the last thing I'm gonna have to talk about before we actually go and mix these chemicals, very important, is just temperature. So with black and white film development, it's recommended that you mix up your working solution specifically for the developer at 20 degrees. But if it's warmer than that, you develop for less time, or if it's cooler than that, you develop for more time. So there is some flexibility and a way to calculate that if you need to. When it comes to the stop bath and the fixer, Ilford recommends that you mix them up at the same temperature as the developer, but they also say they can be used within a 5-degree range of that. So there is some flexibility, and you don't have to worry about either one of these shifting a little bit. They're still going to be completely effective. All right, so I got my 3 graduates here, and I've gone ahead and I've filled these up with water, and I've actually filled this one up with developer as well, but I'll talk you through this, just easier for me to explain it out here. But my approach for this, what I do is to get these to temperature, I just take a mug and I put it under the tap, and I adjust the taps until I get like a consistent around 20.5 degree water coming out. And then I take the mug and I pour that into each one to get these up to the water amount for my working solution. So 400 for fixer, 475 for stop, 400 for developer. And then from there, you can simply just take each one of your chemicals and pour it in until you get up to the 500 mil mark. So it's really easy to do. And the reason that I go for a little bit warmer than 20 degrees, this is really just going to depend on where you live and what the temperatures are like. But I have found often by the time I pour my chemicals in, those will drop it down closer to 20. But I always check afterwards once it's mixed up. And today, like I said, I put my developer into this one and I just checked the temp. And this is actually reading like 20.8 now. So this actually raised the temperature. It's pretty warm in here because I've been filming for like the last 4 hours. So it is important to also check after you've added your chemicals to kind of see what the final temp sits at for your working solutions. And if your developer has changed, you can kind of adjust for this. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now in the next step. Okay, so now you just need to figure out your time. So how long do I need to develop for? How long do I need to stop? And how long do I need to fix for? And the nice thing is the stop bath and the fixer are always going to be the same regardless of the film you're using. So Ilford says minimum of 10 seconds in the stop bath. I usually go for like 30 to 45 seconds. And the fixer, they say anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. You can't really overfix. I usually end up around the 4-minute mark, but there's a lot of flexibility with these two, just like there is with the temperature for them. But the developer and the film are going to dictate how long you need to develop for. So what you can do is just Google the film that you're using. The manufacturer's probably going to have a data sheet and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So today with FP4, Ilford in their data sheet say that if you're developing at 20 degrees with DDX, you need to develop for 10 minutes. But again, this is going to be different for every film. So you would just go and you would set your timers for that. But there is this one app, like I said, that is just so incredibly handy, and I would recommend it to everyone if you're going to start developing at home. And this is called Massive Dev Chart or Massive Dev Timer. And what this does is it gives you this huge list, basically every black and white film you could ever imagine for 35, 120 in sheet. So we'll go 120 and we'll scroll down to FP4, and then you would choose your developer. So we're going to go, again, there's just like endless options here. We're going to pick DDX 1+4 because that's the dilution we used. And then we're going to pick our film speed. So I shot this at 125, which is what the box speed is for FP4. And you can see now it brings me to this screen where it's set up timers for each process. And you would just hit start. It's going to run a timer for development, and each phase after that gives you this audible sound for agitation, which we'll talk about during the development process. And it'll give you like a bell when it's time to switch to the next phase. So I've actually gone ahead and I have one that I've set up because I go and change a few things. There's a couple things in that kind of stock setup that I don't use, and I change the times a bit. But you can see right here, I have mine set up, development, 10 minutes, stop bath, 45 seconds, fixing 4 minutes, and then a final wash, which there's some flexibility with. So this is amazing to use, but what's really great about it too is it has a section right up here where it will calculate different times and temperatures. So if I go up and I hit edit and I click on this temperature portion here, now if I go and I click on temp and time conversion, I can change the temperature and it'll give me a different time. So the very last thing I do right before I'm going to pour in the developer into the tank is I take a final temp reading. Right now this is up at 21. Like I said, it's really warm in here. It'll probably drop, but if we change this to 21 and click save, you can see now it's changed my development time to 9 minutes and 13 seconds. So I could just go ahead and save that, and now I have my adjusted time. So that is such a handy feature, and it's one of the things I love about this. So if you are gonna even just develop for the first time, I would really recommend grabbing this app. But yeah, that's it. We can get into the development room now, and we'll get going on the process. Okay, so we got everything mixed up, we're ready to go, and now it's just running through the process. Develop, stop, fix. But what I do right before I go and pour the developer in is I want to check the temperature, and it's worth noting, it really depends where you live. Obviously that developer is going to go into the tank for 10 minutes, and some people like to have a water bath that's at 20 degrees that they can actually go and put the Paterson tank in, and that way it'll kind of maintain temperature. But I found where I live, the temperatures are pretty stable, and I would just run this as is. I didn't worry about a water bath because I found that my temperatures wouldn't really fluctuate that much over that 10-minute period. Maybe like, a 0.1 or 0.2 of a degree, which isn't really going to change anything. So depends where you live. If it's freezing in your house, you might want to think about it. But yeah, today we'll just leave it as is. But what I'll do then, because we're ready to go, like I said, before the developer goes in, I always just go and check it, especially in this case, because it's been like an hour since I filmed that last part. So I'm sure that this is going to have changed. And right now it's saying 21.5 degrees. So this will be good because we can actually go into our app here, and we'll go and we'll change this to 21.5. And you can see now that's dropped our development time down to 8 minutes and 50 seconds. So that's what's so great about this app, is just being able to mix up your chemicals, and right before you're ready to start, give it a check, and then you can make changes if you need to. So 8 minutes 50. We're good to go. I'm going to put on my nice yellow kitchen gloves. Usually I have like small little black disposable ones, but I'm out of them, so we're using these bad boys today. But we're good. So I'll take out my thermometer. Got our Paterson tank. I got my developer right here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit start. I'm going to pour all this solution in. Get my lid on. Just give it a nice seal, and then you can hear this app ticking at me, and that is telling me that I need to agitate. And I'll explain that in a second, but basically for the first 30 seconds, which are done now, that went really quick, I'm going to give this a bit of a tap. I'm going to agitate. And you can look up, again, manufacturer's recommendations, but Ilford recommends when you pour in the developer, agitate for the first 10 seconds, and then every minute that passes, you agitate another 4 times or for another 4 seconds. And you're going to see this app is going to let me know that every minute. So we're coming up on a minute. So we're just going to give it a nice, gentle agitation, and then again just a couple taps on the bottom at the end, and what that's going to do is that's going to just dislodge any like air bubbles that built up during the agitation. So that's it. So basically for the next, well, it would have been 10 minutes, but obviously our time's shorter. For the next 8 minutes, just every minute I'm going to agitate, and then when we get up to our time running out, I'm going to pour it out. So I'll probably fast forward this part, but typically what I like to do is when I get to around the 15-second or 10-second mark for each step, when there's like 10 seconds remaining, that's when I start pouring out my chemicals, just because that allows me to have them out and have the new chemicals going in right when that timer's stopping. So I'll speed this up. We'll see you in 8 minutes. Okay, so we're getting close to time here, so I'm gonna get ready to pour the developer out. But like I said, for this, it's 8 minutes, 50 seconds of developing. So probably around the 8:40, 8:35 mark, I'm gonna start pouring the developer out. And I'm actually just gonna pour it back into the graduate here because I'm gonna dispose of it later, which I'll talk about after. But here we go, we're around 8:40. So developer out, and then stop bath going in. We'll go ahead and we'll hit the timer for that. So I probably could have gone just a little bit later, but I mean, 5 seconds or 10 seconds doesn't have to be mega precise when you're first starting out. So like I said, stop bath, Ilford says at least 10 seconds. What I like to do usually is I'll just agitate it for about 30 seconds just to make sure it's really kind of going over the film. And then I might let it sit for 10 seconds. But as I do that, I'm gonna get my graduate here. So again, I'm gonna just leave that right now because 45 seconds is what I set for my stop, but if it goes to a minute or if it even went to a minute 15 or something like that, it's not a big deal, but I'll hit continue now and I'm gonna grab my fix. And we'll put that in, and with the fixer, I'm gonna go close to the first minute, just constant agitation, and then I'll do every minute after that. But the nice thing is it's really that developer phase where you gotta be on it. And once the stop bath goes in, and once the fix goes in, you're kind of in the clear, so you can relax. So I'm gonna do this till the minute mark, and then I'll let it sit. And I'll do agitations for 10 seconds every minute for maybe 4 minutes. That's good enough. I'll give it another hit. You can hear it's ticking at me here. You can actually go in on the Massive Dev app and change like agitation schemes and stuff. So I'd obviously change this one so it doesn't tick at me at that minute. But yeah, now we just wait. And what I'll do shortly here is I'm gonna get that mug back in the sink and I'm gonna get some water running because we'll do a wash. And when you wash your film, you don't have to be at 20 degrees, but basically you just want to avoid being at 10 degrees or shocking it. So I'll usually aim for like 18 to 22 to get my water at. But I'll get that ready because, yeah, we're just about done. So coming up on the 4 minute mark, I'm gonna pour the fixer back out into the graduate and then I'm gonna wash. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. One of them is you just basically leave the tank in there with water running in it for like 10 minutes. I don't like to do that route because then your tap's running forever. So I'll explain my way one sec, but we're getting to 4 minutes. So out goes the fixer. And we can set this aside. So now I do have a timer on here, but I'll do it just because, but for this method, it's not too time specific. But typically what I'll do is I'll just do a quick first rinse. So I'm gonna fill this tank with some of that like 19, 20 degree water just to get that initial bit of fix out there. And then Ilford has a recommended way to do this. So they say, fill your tank up, 5 agitations, pour it out, fill it up, 10 agitations, pour it out, fill it up, 20 agitations, pour it out, and you're done. So that's what we're gonna do. This is definitely different than what I typically do because I'm using the Jobo. But I just like the fact that this is Obviously better than 10 minutes of tap running. So I'll fast forward this part, and then when the wash is done, we'll see how our film looks. Okay, so we've done our wash, and the very last thing that I like to do, there's a number of different products that you can get for kind of a final rinse. Ilford sells their own. I don't know the specific name of that one, but basically these help the film dry without streaks and spots. They're kind of like a bit of a soapy liquid, so you would do that at the end. All that I've done for the longest time now is I just take some of that distilled or deionized water, and I just simply do a final rinse with that. So I'd go ahead now, I'd take out this funnel, and I would just put this in, and just simply pour this in the tank until it covers the film. And sometimes I'll just grab the spindle here and give the film a couple dunks and pour it out. And the way I see is that's just, you know, giving it a final rinse with like very pure water that's not going to have anything that'll cause water spots. And doing it this way, afterwards, I'll tell you how I dry it, but this is a method that's worked for me where I end up having no water spots at all. So pull this out, give it a couple taps, and we'll pull our film off. And we have negatives. And they're looking good. Okay, so when it comes to drying the film, you'll have these clips that came with your kit. So you take the lighter gray one on top, and then the darker gray one is weighted, and you just put that at the bottom of the film. And all that I do is I hang it up here in my bathroom, and I shut the window and the doors, and I turn the shower on and just let it steam up the bathroom, and then turn it off and leave, and give it a couple hours. You know, some people like to use squeegees or their fingers with photo flow, and honestly, like I said, using the distilled method, steaming the place up a little bit, for me it's worked great, just with, you know, having it dry with no spots and no dust and stuff like that. So really simple. Distilled water, a little bit of steam if you can, and just leave it for a couple hours. But that is it. That's our roll of film developed. Last thing we'll talk about is chemical disposal. We'll jump back out there for that. Okay, so one last thing. You might be wondering, what do I do with these working solutions after I've used them? Basically, the method that I've come to now with my developing, just because it's so simple, is I pour all of my solutions. So I'll pour my developer, my stop, and my fix into separate jugs, usually the empty distilled water jugs. And once they get full, I just take them to the local tip here in England, or the dump, what we'd call it in Canada. And they have like a hazardous waste section. I just have it labeled kind of as much as I can when it comes to information about what is in each one of those. And I just figure, you know, that's such a simple way to get rid of it. It doesn't really require that much effort. So that is what I do. But anyways, that wraps this one up. I try to keep it somewhat concise. Obviously, there's a lot of information there, but I just wanted to hopefully lay this out in the most straightforward way possible. And like I said, I hope it just encourages you to give this a shot yourself. And you know, everyone told me before I first started developing at home, it's so simple. And I think as soon as you finally do it once, you do realize like, wow, this actually is really straightforward, and it's not as temperamental as you think it's gonna be. When I did my first roll, I thought like, if I'm even off by 3 seconds, you know, it's gonna ruin it. And there is some flexibility. Like I said, as soon as you do it once or twice, you're going to probably dive right into it and feel pretty confident, and you can test out all sorts of different methods. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions, let me know below. I'll try my best to answer all of them. And other than that, just want to say thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.